So I'm talking about the dimensions of diversity and my journey from Detroit to DC to Dubai. And one of the areas that comes to my mind is when I first left Detroit for the first time. I went to undergrad at the University of Pennsylvania. And so that's in Philadelphia, and that was on the East Coast of the US. And that's the first time I lived outside of Michigan, which is the Midwest of the United States. And see, in Michigan, when I grew up, for the most part, they were just Black people and white people. And if you talked about diversity, that was pretty much what got talked about. Now, closer to, and this is the 80s, right? As I'm kind of leaving high school and I'm dating myself, 1985. And there was a growing population in a Hispanic community, of a Hispanic presence in the region, and also of Chaldean presence in the region. So, and probably in the late 70s, early 80s, that those groups were growing. However, for me, in the workplaces and the schools that I attended, for the most part, it was just Black people and white people. And there were conversations about race that were just that, they were just that. I happened to grow up in a neighborhood that was, when we first moved in, it was predominantly white. We were the first African Americans on the block. And we moved in next door to some people who were Caucasian and very racist and very vocal about their views that that Black people were less than, they were inferior. And we lived next door to that. And there were younger men as part of that family who were not managed by their parents and had a lot to say. So my first experience of racism and conflict that was based on a factor that I had no control over was there. But when I got to the University of Pennsylvania, an interesting dimension of diversity that I discovered, and I think, again, I share these stories because I think it's very helpful to have people have a sense of, the varied dimensions that exist and what they, and the consequences of them. And one of the dimensions that stood out is I didn't pledge a sorority. So I was at the University of Pennsylvania, small Black population at that time. I don't remember the percentages, but we were a small percentage of the population. And there were, we also shared, like, we were in Philadelphia in the city, so there were some other urban universities close by, and we shared fraternal and sorority groups across those campuses. So when I was in school, the popular ones for women were the AKAs and the Deltas, and you were like one of those. And I was neither of those. And I considered pledging and, participating, and for a variety of reasons chose not to, and wound up discovering that, on that campus, as a Black person not affiliated with a sorority group, I felt like an outcast. It was an example of not feeling like I belonged, with these groups. While the pledging process looked very unattractive to me, and I don't know, maybe most people, it was something to be endured. And then when you succeeded, you were part of the community, and you had a community, and you had a local community on campus. And in Philadelphia itself, Drexel, Villanova, Temple, close by, we shared those organizations shared. So there's a local community, pretty substantive. But there was also, of course, the national network of those sorority organizations that also existed. So in terms of social support, it was there. In terms of academic support, it was there. In terms of kind of professional nurturing, mentoring, and access to opportunities. You're talking about being affiliated with a group and doing conferences and meetings and collaborations on a regular basis. So you're basically building a network. And I didn't come out of university with any of that. And I remember feeling very much like an outsider. I remember feeling very disadvantaged. There were other resources on campus that I was able to access and use to put myself into a community that could nourish me and contribute to me. But it's a great example for me of why we look at dimensions of diversity and why they matter. So if we talk about it, in the world of work, in the world of community, we are talking about really inclusiveness and belonging. When you're at home in a community and have a sense of belonging, there's this high degree of comfort and confidence and self-assuredness that can be there. And when you don't feel like you belong, see, there are ends of the spectrum. You can feel nothing. And I certainly had some friends that didn't belong to any organization and they didn't feel a thing. Not good, not bad, not right, not wrong. They didn't miss a thing. They weren't feeling like an outcast and they didn't feel like they didn't belong. I did. And as a result, there's just this sense of weakness, a sense of insecurity, a sense of vulnerability, a sense of loneliness that comes from that not belonging. Now, that was me in college, and I did well to create my own sense of community and had groups that I belonged to or joined for the purpose of creating communities to benefit myself. But not all of them were Black, which is interesting. So then I sort of felt like an outcast there too. But nonetheless, the point of it is belonging, and the sense of belonging and the comfort and security of feeling like you belong is a really critical piece of that's tied to the diversity conversation that we don't want to get missed. It's why we talk about it. So if you're in a workplace or in an academic setting where it's about people flourishing and thriving, you want to look to see for the people who feel like they're alone and they're the outliers or the outcasts. The outliers just mean I'm different and I'm outside the normal distribution. Outcast is like I'm outside and I'm unwanted. And that is something I carried with me. Those factors contribute to how well somebody can do, how effective they can be in their performance, how active and engaged they can be in being their best self. So if you're an employer looking at this conversation, it's a critical piece to understanding why you should focus on belonging, because you're not going to get the kind of performance, you're not going to get the productivity, you're not going to build the cohesive teams that need to be built when you have people feeling like outliers or outcasts. And that's an aspect of why we share about dimensions of diversity. And I'll be continuing the stories and the journey in this conversation, dimensions of diversity from Detroit to DC to Dubai. Please join me. Thank you for listening and subscribe so you can stay tuned when the posts come. Take care.